You have already failed, and something is being built to replace you. Newly constructed humans are informed of the machine's existence at the moment of their creation, pre-selected for skills deemed useful to reconstruction. Falsified records of tree rings, starlight, and radioactive decay are maintained to preserve the appearance of history. The methods of that falsification are documented later in this file. The message begins with a subject already condemned. You've already failed. Those words, attributed within the file to the supervising researcher, are the first thing certain replacement individuals will ever hear upon becoming aware of themselves. The first replacement humans housed off-site must, of necessity, be informed of the anomaly's existence and function during the very process of their creation. Concealment at this stage is not attempted, as concealment would defeat the operational purpose. These newly constructed individuals are intended to participate directly in reconstruction and recolonization efforts. And to that end, certain skill sets deemed appropriate to reconstruction have been pre-selected for increased prevalence in the first 5 million individuals produced. As the global population increases, the associated process of diaspora and reconstruction is projected to accelerate geometrically, permitting economic and agricultural infrastructure to recover as rapidly as circumstances allow. The intended outcome is a populated world that appears, from within, to have never been interrupted. It is acknowledged, without emphasis, that some replacement humans may not survive the initial renovation period. Such individuals can be recreated indefinitely. The process continues, iteration after iteration, until all major population centers and all Foundation facilities have been completed to specification. During this same interval, Foundation administrative assets are directed away from field concerns and toward a quieter task: the falsification of dendrochronological, astronomical, and radiometric dating records. The purpose of this falsification is the maintenance of the appearance of historical continuity, so that the reconstructed world will not, upon examination of its trees, its skies, or its stones, betray the seam at which it was resumed. Personnel are directed for full procedural detail to the document designated 2000 Retcon, version 2.3.3. In the event that significant portions of natural habitat are also destroyed prior to the project's completion, personnel are directed instead, or additionally, to the document designated 2001 Tier, version 3.0, which enumerates approved methods for the rapid regrowth of ecosystems considered necessary to the resumed world's function. Preceding the file itself, an access notice is displayed. It warns that the document requires Level 4/2000 clearance, a designation not conferred by standard Level 4 protocol, and issued only through separate authorization channels overseen by the History and Metaphysical Containment Liaison Office and the O5 Council. Any attempt to proceed beyond the notice without such clearance is grounds for immediate termination of Foundation employment, along with the cancellation of all associated educational, medical, retirement, and mortality benefits. By submitting credentials, the reader consents to exposure to a known cognitohazardous image and affirms prior inoculation against that image. Unauthorized viewing will render the console inoperable. Security personnel will then be dispatched to revive the reader and escort them to a detention cell for interrogation. Access attempts from any terminal not connected to the Foundation intranet result in immediate termination, regardless of clearance level. Upon submission of credentials, the interface indicates that a security cognitohazard has been activated and that scans are being conducted for neural activity. After a pause, consciousness is confirmed and the file is retrieved. A brief, unattributed line appears within the retrieval sequence, reading, "You people don't get it. And I don't think you ever will." The formal entry then begins. The item is designated SCP-2000. Its object class is Thaumiel. The special containment procedures state that the entrance to SCP-2000 is disguised as a disused park ranger station within Yellowstone National Park. Despite several civilian trespassing attempts, the entrance has not been breached at any point in the installation's recorded history, and no additional physical containment measures have been deemed necessary. Protocol Plainsight-201 is in effect for the site, governing the maintenance of its outward appearance and the discretion of surrounding activity. Necessary supplies and replacement personnel are delivered by unmarked road vehicles or civilian helicopter, as appropriate to the circumstances of the delivery. Access to documentation concerning this object is tightly stratified. No personnel below Level 4 2000 clearance are permitted to review files pertaining to the anomaly itself or to any of the protocols associated with its containment and upkeep. Descent within the structure is more restricted still. No personnel below Level 5 2000 clearance are permitted access to the facility below Sub-Level 3. All personnel assigned to the object must submit to a neural archetype scan on a monthly basis. Those stationed on site are subject to weekly scans, with the resulting records stored locally within the facility. Personnel of Level 4 2000 clearance or above who are stationed on site are not permitted to leave Yellowstone National Park during the course of their assignment. In the event of transfer, whether elective or compulsory, Class A amnestics are to be administered, and false memories implanted consistent with assignment to other high-security or Keter-class objects. Additional personnel may be assigned to the facility and granted temporary Level 4 2000 clearance at the discretion of the item's HMCL supervisor and O5 command. The exterior surface of the containment structure is surrounded by Scranton reality anchors, installed every 20 meters in a hexagonal arrangement. Their function is to prevent incursion by hostile anomalous interference. Each anchor is inspected semi-annually and replaced as necessary. Technicians servicing these components are directed to reference the current revision of the relevant service document. In addition, 5 Xiank/Anastasakos constant temporal sinks, capable of maintaining a stable tachyon flux across the expanse of the facility at a maximum output rating of 100 watts each, have been installed within the site. These devices are subject to monthly maintenance, with technicians consulting the appropriate reference document for procedure. The unresolved matter raised at the outset, namely, why so ordinary a landscape should require so extraordinary a perimeter, begins to answer itself here. The facility is not merely hidden. It is anchored, insulated, and shielded against interference from directions that conventional security cannot address. Within the maintenance regime, one pseudo-Riemannian manifold has been initiated at the entrance to Sub-Level 4. This manifold must remain open at all times. Should the manifold fail, procedure Dead Euclid 101 is to be executed immediately. Other non-anomalous life support and utility systems may be maintained in accordance with Standard Foundation Maintenance Protocol, Section 101.5, pertaining to mission-critical components. Wherever possible, non-anomalous materials and resources are to be used for the object's maintenance and repair, preserving the anomalous inventory for the singular function the object exists to perform. In the event of any K-class scenario which does not compromise the existence or function of the object, procedure CYA-009 is to be enacted as soon as possible. Remaining Foundation installations globally are to monitor the scenario as it unfolds, preserving what material resources are possible under the Ganymede Protocol, until such time as all remaining sites respond, quote, all clear, unquote, to queries issued as defined in document 2000 XKAC 1.9. Upon receipt of the all clear code, procedure Lazarus 01 is to be implemented. Appended to the file is a note from former Administrator Dr. William Fritz, preserved on permanent record at his explicit instruction. It reads as follows. I want this on permanent record, and I don't rightly care if you think it's an insult to your intelligence. Some things are just this important. This device is absolutely not an excuse to let down our guard or take greater risks with SCP objects, or cross-test them, or whatever you might have in mind. Primary containment is still our best chance at survival. Otherwise, there would be no reason to make the cover-up so extensive. We can only suspend God's disbelief so many times before the universe just says no. And considering what we've had to deal with in these past few decades, we may have passed that point already. The note is unsigned beyond his name and stands without further commentary in the master file. Description: SCP-2000 is a subterranean Foundation installation, originally constructed sometime in the last redacted years, for the purpose of reconstructing civilization in the event that a K-class end-of-the-world scenario could not be averted in time to prevent humanity's extinction or near extinction. Since its inception, SCP-2000 has been activated at least twice. Foundation records regarding SCP-2000's construction and history prior to this assumed first use have been lost. Whether this information blackout is the result of accident or design is impossible to determine. The mission-critical portion of the installation begins 75 meters below ground level and extends to a depth of 100 meters. Although the scope of engineering required to recreate SCP-2000 in its entirety is impossible to execute while maintaining secrecy, all subsystems of the installation have been successfully reproduced in a laboratory setting. The installation itself, and all procedures involved in its upkeep, are mundane in nature. Information regarding the esoteric Foundation technologies necessary for the installation's function is filed separately under Document 2000 SSEX and is not considered within the scope of the present summary. Primary power for the facility is provided by a liquid fluoride thorium reactor, rated for 1 gigawatt of total output, with a reactor life of 70 years at maximum capacity. A geothermal generator has also been installed, taking advantage of the region's volcanic activity. This secondary generator is capable of powering the facility in a designated standby mode indefinitely, allowing the installation to remain dormant across intervals of unknown length without external support or attention. SCP-2000 further contains water treatment facilities, air purification and recycling systems, and hydroponic production wings sufficient to meet internal demand under prolonged isolation. Housing has been provided in quantities necessary to permanently sustain up to 10,000 personnel. The purpose of these 10,000 berths, and the criteria by which their eventual occupants are to be selected, is addressed in later sections of the master file. Central to the primary function of the installation is a subsystem designated the Bright/Zarshian Hominid Replicator, of which 500,000 individual units are integrated into the facility. At peak operational capacity, and following a warm-up period of 5 days, this array is rated to produce 100,000 viable, non-anomalous human specimens per day. Raw biological material is drawn from surrounding hot springs and underground magma flows by way of an underground Riemannian transit pipe. Genetic sequencing is provided by a computer memory bank containing records of all known human alleles. In principle, the system is capable of reconstructing any lost human genome, or generating an arbitrary number of novel and unique genomes in quantities sufficient to repopulate human civilization. An attached researcher note attributed to Dr. Christopher Zarshian of Biotech Research and Development qualifies the current status of the array. Use of the replicator system is at present suspended outside of maintenance testing and emergency situations, though the Standing Contingency Directive remains active. A possible hostile incursion is still under investigation, and the associated database is described as particularly difficult to debug. Observed distributions of congenital and genetic defects remain significantly above baseline. Current guaranteed viability in new specimens is estimated at between 60 and 75%. Appended to this note, in the researcher's own hand, is a single further remark. You can't bring them back. Humans produced through this process may be advanced to any desired chronological age without extending the 5-day incubation period. Beyond the physical construction of the specimen, the replicator system is additionally capable of implanting memory content through the administration of Class G hallucinogenics and developmental hypnotherapy. To this end, life histories, neural archetype scans, and complete genomes of numerous Foundation personnel are maintained on file. This archive includes all personnel holding Level 4/2000 clearance and above. The stated intent of this redundancy is to ensure that the installation may be activated and the associated recovery procedure initiated by as few as one surviving human operator. Activation of the installation is gated by the implementation of the so-called Ganymede Protocol, an internal designation indicating that the Foundation has failed to prevent a class-ending scenario. Upon such implementation, the security systems governing the installation will unlock, permitting any Foundation employee to initiate the associated recovery procedure. Should the installation remain inactive for a period of 20 years following this unlocking, its security posture will be relaxed further still, at which point any non-anomalous human being may access the facility and initiate the procedure without credential. Once the procedure is activated, the installation's internal monitoring systems will attempt to locate all personnel holding the appropriate clearance and to assess their present condition. Mission-critical personnel who cannot be located by these internal systems will be replicated from the most recent neural archetype scan retained on file. These replicated personnel are awakened prior to the initialization of any other system within the facility, ensuring that qualified operators are present before broader functions come online. Did you catch that? Following the revival of these personnel, the installation's security locks will resume their normal function, and unrestricted access will lapse. A complete enumeration of the contingency options available under the procedure is retained in a corresponding document, access to which is restricted to personnel of the highest clearance tier associated with the installation. Operators are further reminded that receipt of the designated All Clear code, as defined in the applicable authentication document, may be waived only in the event that all other Foundation facilities have been rendered inoperative. In any other circumstance, the All Clear must be received before ordinary operations resume. In the absence of such a waiver, security and mobile task force elements revived under the procedure will be dispatched to all remaining Foundation facilities, where they will confirm the continued function of those sites and the integrity of local reality in and around them. Only upon verification of both conditions is the recovery process considered to have progressed beyond its initial phase. Procedure Lazarus 01 commences when an authorized Level 5/2000 employee inputs the desired resume date into the BZHR control unit housed within the object. Upon receipt of this input, the available units within the installation begin the production of prominent political and cultural leaders appropriate to the selected time period, drawing upon descriptions and genetic information held on file. Concurrent with the generation of these individuals, a broader global populace consistent with the chosen period is replicated to whatever scale the procedure requires. The greater portion of the installation's floor space is dedicated not to biological production, but to storage. Building materials, construction equipment, factory machinery, agricultural equipment, and extensive computer database storage occupy the majority of available volume. Alongside these infrastructural provisions, a substantial cultural repository is maintained on site, containing copies of thousands of famous works of art, music, and literature, together with a full backup of the World Wide Web. This redundancy is considered essential in the event that other repositories have been destroyed prior to or during the triggering event. Appended to the records of a previous iteration of Lazarus 01, discovered upon its conclusion, is a note preserved here in its original form. The note, entered by a Foundation historian, advises that if the procedure must ever be conducted again, the resume date should not be set further back than 20 years before the event. The rationale offered is twofold. First, that a nearer resume date permits the process to piggyback upon a considerable quantity of undestroyed structures already present in the world. Second, that a nearer resume date renders the resumption of historical continuity substantially easier to manage. The historian further observes that a greater interval places undue strain upon personnel who must otherwise rebuild to chronological specifications solely to accommodate the demands of population and agriculture. The note concludes with a question regarding how much of the 20th and subsequent centuries the Foundation truly wishes to rewrite, and how many times, before noting that one Great War is difficult enough to keep track of. A subsequent annotation confirms that the requesting historian's tenure will honor this request, with official documentation to follow. 2 world wars, it concludes, are plenty. Projections indicate that world population, manufacturing capability, agricultural output, and culture can be restored to conditions comparable to those of the year 2000 Common Era within a window of 25 to 50 years following implementation of the procedure. At the conclusion of procedure Lazarus 01, the amnestic agent designated ENUI-5 will be released en masse. This dispersal will cause all reconstructed humans to forget any affiliation with Foundation assets or personnel. History, from that point forward, will resume from the chosen date. It is acknowledged within the documentation that each iteration of the procedure will necessarily alter the course of human events, owing to the enormous complexity of human social interaction. Further research into predictive historical modeling based on observations gathered from prior completions of procedure Lazarus 01 remains ongoing. A note from the Hazardous Materials and Containment Liaison follows. No further proposals for behavioral or cultural modification will be accepted at this time. Previous attempts to ameliorate violent and sociopathic tendencies in humanity as a whole have already been implemented and are deemed successful. Experimentation using second iteration subjects indicates that any additional modification would undermine tenacity to such a degree that technological and social progress would be noticeably inhibited. Reference is made to a redacted experiment log for further information. The note is attributed to the Hazardous Materials and Containment Liaison Supervisor. What follows in the file is designated Document 2000 SSEX. It establishes the basic operational parameters of technology developed specifically for the SCP-2000 project. The document offers a single caveat before its technical disclosures begin. Although the technology described may, at first review, appear to be anomalous in nature, it is in fact based entirely on verifiable scientific principles already in use by the Foundation to effect containment elsewhere. The distinction, the file implies, is significant. The machinery within the facility is not itself an anomaly. It is only the scale of its intended application and the condition of the world it is designed to answer that place it within the Foundation's purview. The supporting technologies deserve individual attention. The Scranton Reality Anchor predates the first activation of the installation itself, credited to its namesake in the late 19th century. Its housing and internal circuitry are constructed from a corrosion-resistant beryllium-bronze alloy, its design inspired by artifacts whose origin has been expunged from accessible record. The device functions by suppressing the emergence of virtual particle and antiparticle pairs required for a certain class of reality-bending phenomena to manifest. The expense of producing the necessary alloy has limited Foundation-wide deployment to units with a modest area of effect. An attached researcher note advises that the mechanism of the anchor and the source of its inspiration must be kept secret from all possible reality-bending entities, for reasons the author trusts are obvious. Only qualified maintenance technicians of the appropriate clearance are permitted access to the documentation. Should any staff member of the installation reveal such clearance, they are to be reported to Overseer Command for reassignment and amnestic therapy. The note stresses that this is not a punishment, but a legitimate safety concern. If these devices are compromised, so too is the lifeboat. A second supporting system, the Zayank Anastasakos Constant Temporal Sink, is designed to stabilize the flow of causality across a given field. Through high-power electromagnetic radiation in the radio band, coupled with a tachyon field emitter, it produces a permeable event boundary. Organic and electrical systems may pass through unaffected, while a static causal environment is maintained within. In practice, temporal anomalies that might otherwise prevent the installation from being constructed have no effect, provided at least one such device remains in operation. There are no plans for Foundation-wide implementation. An accompanying researcher note acknowledges the utility of temporal sinks for containing objects that require a single second to last hundreds of thousands of years, or for holding a point of reference constant during temporal repair. However, natural causal relationships possess a flexibility the human mind is not equipped to address. Wider implementation has been attempted in a past iteration. Further inquiries into the results of that attempt will not be accepted.